Hey, what's going on? Welcome to Angular Air. I am your host, Justin Schwarzenberger, and on today's episode, we are going to be looking at year one with NGXS. Should be pretty cool. Let's dive into it, say hi to our panelists, and then we'll meet our guest and get going with our topic. Joining us today, we've got Alyssa Nigel. Alyssa, how's it going?
Hello, hello. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. We've got Mike Brocky with us. Mike, what's going on?
Not too much, just listening to the tunes in my head.
Nice, nice. Are you going to sing those out loud during the episode at some point?
Nope, and you're welcome.
Oh, does that count? I mean, you said you're welcome. I mean, that's kind of your jam, right?
You know me, I love some Dwayne Johnson singing, but no, I'm not going to sing today.
All right.
I thought Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus was his jam.
That's my spirit song.
That's just when he comes in. Okay, Austin, what's going on?
How's everyone doing today?
It's good. It's good that you're on point today for this episode about NGXS. So bring your A game, right?
What is that though?
It's something. I think we'll dive into it. All right, our guest today, Mark Whitfeld. Mark, how's it going?
Hey, how's it, everyone?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to have you.
Yeah.
Why don't you give our viewers a little bit background about yourself so they can get to know you, and then we'll kind of dive into the topic.
Yeah, so I'm a software developer. That's a good thing if you're leading a software project. Yeah, I've been developing professional software since I think about 2002. The company I work for is a company called Chilisoft. We're based in Durban, South Africa. So that's the reason why my accent sounds a little bit different to everyone else. And we are, I've been at the same company for about 17 years. It's a fantastic bunch of people. I've really grown up with mentors that have focused on things like test-driven development, solid principles, clean code, that sort of stuff. So I'm really passionate about that sort of thing. And then with the NGXS project, when that came up at the beginning of last year, I remember watching the episode with Austin about a year ago, just after he had released it. Something really struck a chord with me in terms of how it was put together. It was nice and simple, but it did a lot for you. So I really value code that's simple, straightforward, easy to understand, and well put together. Yeah.
Nice. Yes, those are very good things to follow, right?
Yeah.
I love the whole clean coding thing and thinking about that testability and stuff like that. Very cool. All right. Yeah. So, and now you're helping to maintain the NGXS project now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm leading the core team on the project. Pretty much just trying to keep things focused, keeping things going in a good direction. There's lots of good ideas around the framework, but really trying to guard those and keep it to its core. So, yeah.
Cool. Now you mentioned our episode that we had a little less than a year ago about NGXS, an announcement kind of diving in. Why don't we do a quick recap or kind of fill in our viewers of what NGXS is in case they haven't seen that episode and kind of get caught up before we start heading into it.
I wish we could, I wasn't thinking about this, but we should have took the pictures of me from that episode and see how much I've aged from doing open source software.
Isn't that like the 10-year challenge? Don't we need like 10 years instead of 1 year?
Was it
No,
that
hold on.
bad?
I'm gonna go get a screenshot from that video. I'll be right back.
Was it like raising your child? Like it was that it was that much, Austin?
I mean, so it's really funny because I've got a lot of open source projects that I've created over the past few years, and really like none of them they were all very popular, but none of them like really took off in terms of like the community. So I've came on the show before and talked about UI components that I built and charts and things like that, and I kind of just fell into making a state management solution. Like I think in the original episode and in the docs, I actually avoided it for as long as I possibly could because I didn't want to deal with it. Because even though there's tons of these blog posts online that talk about, oh, I used RxJS to make a Redux in 10 lines of code. Congratulations, and try to use that. It gets really hairy very quickly. And so, it was a project that I didn't actually really want to make, but I ended up making it, and I mean, it really took off. It seemed to really resonate with a lot of people, and kind of the core things that I baked into it was RxJS is awesome, but it is really easy to mess up RxJS operators. And you really have to kind of know what you're doing. Oh, here we go, Mike.
I think I captured you well there.
Is that?
But that was you 11 months ago.
All right.
And I'm learning about NGXS today for myself. I wasn't on that episode.
Hey, I want to tell a little quick inside story to give you a little kind of taste of what this experience was like for me going on Austin's journey of starting NGXS. Okay.
Well, and of course, I pulled everyone into it like I always do. I want to get everyone's feedback.
Yeah. So I remember it was about a year ago. I was at a dance convention for my daughter, hanging out, doing the dad thing, which is just looking at tech and stuff in between all the things going on. And Austin starts messaging me, and he's like, dude, I really don't want to do it. I really don't want to do it. Do what? I don't want to make a state management library. I really don't. I'm trying to put it. And then next thing I know, I think I'm going to do it. I'm like, what? And then so he dives in, and it's like, okay, he starts figuring these things out, just rapid fire, all these ideas are coming. And then before you know it, he just dives in and does it in this short amount of time, which was insane. But yeah, it's crazy. And it's crazy to look at where we're at a year now from it. So, but that's my story.
Yeah, I remember soliciting you to help me edit my docs. That was a big thing that I was like, oh, this stuff is so hard and we got to make it easy. And so I was like, we got to have awesome docs out of the box. And then, that was one of the big things. And then, I wanted it to look like Angular code, right? I wanted the code to feel like you're writing Angular, and I wanted to reduce all the RxJS as much as possible and kind of just make it simple, right? Set state, return something, right? And be able to do other little things inside of it. And it kind of took off. Danny was on the show, the original show. Danny Blue, he helped, with some of the ideas that we originally had. My original thought was basing it on Vuex, which is Vue's state management solution. But as we iterated, we're like, oh, we can do this better because of certain Angular, the way that Angular does certain things. And it kind of just evolved, and it got so big, right? And so many people were wanting to contribute to it. I had just never had an open source project like that before. And Mark here was one of the guys that was working on it with me. And he was just really doing a great job. And I think he implemented some really crazy RxJS code. And after I saw that, I was like, Mark is awesome. He is my new hero. It was what was it? It was the
action pipeline.
Yes, the action pipeline. That thing was crazy. And after that, I was like, Mark is the man. And I kind of had I was working on other projects that weren't using it, and the community just kept growing, and Mark was right there, and I was like, Mark, hey, do you want to take this over? And that's where we're at today.
Yeah, so I think in taking over the framework, it was, well, call it a framework, but it's a library. but there's a lot of things going on. It feels like a framework. But gee, I remember not last year, 2017, I implemented a very, very large project using NGRX. And I just remember how we had to grapple with RxJS and all the concepts there, and I think that's where I potentially polished those RxJS skills. But even with that library, I tried many different approaches to try and simplify things, and I tried my own different experiments to try and get it to be simpler, more understandable code. The developers from our client, whenever a new developer joined the project, they would battle to get on board with what was going on, and it was quite a challenge. And I think there's a lot of people out there that were feeling the same thing. So Austin, when you released NGXS, for me, it just resonated. I thought, flip, it's nice and simple. It's to the point. It gets all the stuff out the way. Lets you focus on that unidirectional data flow. Yeah, so it was very difficult to keep my hands out of it, because it was such an exciting and promising project. So yeah.
So what are some of the things that make that unique, that feel of it, like specifically that you like about it, and that can be that advantage for the state management, especially in an Angular project?
Yeah, I think for me, the one thing that I liked about it up front was the fact that all of your different state classes could, even though you're part of one entire application state tree, your state classes, they feel like they're separate. They just exist on their branch of the tree, and they feel like they're separate things. So it felt like it was quite a nice separation of concerns as you broke down your application into different modules. You could put something there, something there, something there, and they don't have to know about each other. I found in that larger application, you were continually bringing your reducers together and composing these reducers, and it was this whole dance to get this whole thing looking like it should. And so I think for me that was one of the main things that really stuck out. And then just the simplicity, especially of the selectors, where previously I'd gone down crazy paths of doing combine latest and all these different RxJS operators to try and bring different aspects of the state tree together. And then with NGXS, it was these simple selector decorators that just created a function that would select from the right part of the state tree, and you could compose them together, and virtually at the last second you say, okay, let's make it observable. And for me, I think that's the other thing that really stood out, because after seeing so many developers battle with that sort of coding, they could just compose these functions together, and then at the last second you convert it to an observable, and just use an async pipe, and you virtually never have to think about the different operators that you might be tempted to use.
Yeah, I know. For me, in thinking about state management, one of the things that always becomes a challenge is like the mind map of where everything's at, and how does it fit into features or domains, right? And how does that spread across the code, and then how does that play out? I kind of get the sense, and it's been a little bit since I've looked at NGXS, so I don't know if stuff has changed, but that concept of the state classes and the containing of that domain or feature, that kind of helps solve that. Is that correct? Or helps that be easier to mind map and keep track of, like, these chunks going on with a relatable code?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was, I think, just the way that it separated out those different state classes really created something that really fitted along the lines of a modular architecture, which I really appreciated about what it brought to the table as a library.
Very cool. Very cool. So, can you maybe go over what features and stuff are in the library right now, where we're at currently?
Okay, I think maybe it would be good to start off with talking about what's happened in the library since Austin handed over, and I think for myself it's been a quite a learning journey in terms of open source. How much time and commitment it takes. It's quite hectic. You can ask my wife about that. I've had to get permissions many evenings to do work and things like that. But when I took over from Austin, the main thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to protect the core of the framework and allow for the ability for people to extend the framework without having to get their hands into the center of the framework. So I keep on talking about it as a framework, and I know some people like to make the distinction between libraries and frameworks, but really in my mind, I feel like that's what it's become. It's become there's a core library called NGXS Store, and then there's a number of plugins around it. We had some very enthusiastic contributors that were wanting to introduce decorators and extend the API and really enthusiastically add on features onto the library, but it kind of felt like it was venturing off onto their particular use case and not something that would be generally applicable. So what we did is we created a NGXS Labs organization. It was called NGXS Contrib. It's now called NGXS Labs, and it really creates a place for community members to create projects and plugins that they can iterate on it really quickly. They can break stuff. They can do what they want, and then eventually, once they've kind of released a 1.0 of that, we'll look at the adoption that's happening within the community, let them iterate a bit more, and eventually, once the core team is happy to accept one of those plugins as an official plugin, we'll bring it into the NGXS organization. So at
That's
the moment,
always,
it's been, yeah.
I was going to say, that's always like really hard when you get when you create an open source project and you get these enthusiastic people like wanting to contribute, right? Like you want to like embrace that and have that, but at the same time, like they probably have like very specific use cases in mind that, and you don't want to like put the project, steer it down that road. And thinking about the bigger picture is just always really challenging for any open source project.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance because you have these people who are so interested in helping out that you don't necessarily, you feel bad kind of turning them away for any work that they may have invested potentially a significant amount of time in, to be able to say, hey, I'd really like to be able to get that, but yeah, it's not going to really address the totality of our users in the way that it affects you. So there's definitely an interesting balance there.
Yeah, one of the core team members is actually he's one of those contributors that just he has really out of the box ideas. He has very, very creative ideas, but not all of them align perfectly with with what everybody would need. So he's created a number of these projects, which have in themselves received a lot of adoption within the community, but he's one of those really creative, out of the box thinkers, and just because he potentially is thinking differently to myself was no reason to keep him off the team. I think the team that we've created at the moment has an amazing balance of personalities, from conservative to quite adventurous, hardcore coders, and others that are really just looking for stability and creating an arena for coding. we've got an incredible team that we've put together there. So, and I must say, Austin, you mentioned how this community really took off. It always amazes me when we've got the NGXS Slack, and I'm hardly ever the first person to answer one of the questions that pops up there. There's guys that are just continually answering questions. There's just constant activity. It's quite hectic to keep up with what's going on. But amongst us in the team, and also within the community, there's lots of very active, very enthusiastic members that are adding their thoughts and ideas and answering questions, and yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, I think I'm in the Slack channel. I think I have 500 unread Slack messages. What? So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you find it challenging, like knowing that you've got this library framework that is kind of does core essential business logic, right, for applications, and now a lot of people are using it and businesses are using it. How do you manage like the stress level of thinking about the fact that like these companies are banking their software on this library, right, this framework?
Well, I haven't thought about that, and now you've really stressed me out. And it is something that has been a serious challenge. I've taken a very much overly conservative approach. Really, a lot of people ping me and try and bring me into discussions on issues, and I let the other core team members handle that until they raise it. My main focus is on PRs. Just to make sure what is coming through. I'm trying to be a gatekeeper for the API for backwards compatibility. With this release that we did last week, it's version 3.4. There were a whole lot of new features that we added, and just before we released, we realized that some of the exciting new TypeScript things that we had, some of the new exciting TypeScript things that we had used were now no longer compatible with TypeScript 2.5, 2.6, and Angular 5, and that's what version 3 was already supporting. So we had to go back to the drawing board, dumb down some of those refactorings and typings that had happened, just to make sure that within version 3 we were still supporting the older Angular versions that we started off supporting. We are planning in version 4 to be focusing on more modern TypeScript, more modern Angular versions and things like that. But you know, that has been quite a balance and quite a challenge to get right.
I remember when I was the gatekeeper telling you that I'm not going to merge your pull request.
Yeah, curating and taking care of like that API concept, right, and the backwards compatibility. Maybe we can get your insight on that, because I think that's compelling, not just for NGXS, but everybody who's building their own software applications, right? And you're thinking about the API, whether you're writing an API for your components to be reused or your services or anything. We're always trying to think about like the long-term use of that and how to make sure that continues forward as we as our code base grows. Have you learned anything like strategy-wise as you've gone through this process of like, okay, here's a cool way to handle like approaching that, to make that easier for you or us as code writers to handle those scenarios, to be prepared for a flexible API or something like that? Any lessons learned there?
I think just minimizing the number of changes. It sounds silly, but really realizing that every single little change that comes in is going to be something that you're committing to for the foreseeable future. There's a couple of mistakes that were made early on in version 3 that a lot of the users have come around and said, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? And it's scheduled to change in version 4, but we've just got to live with it until we get to that point. And I know with the whole thing of semantic versioning and the whole thing of major representing breaking changes and minor being features and your revision being more bug fixes and things like that. It's very tempting to bump the major version. A lot of people seem to think, oh, because you're on version 3, you're really advanced. You've done a lot and you've grown things a lot. But upping the major version number means that you've now broken something and dishonored previous contracts that you had with your users. So for me, making a major version break, making a major version change, it's breaking changes. It's not as positive as you would as some people make it out to be. Although that opportunity to make those breaking changes and to improve the framework where it's really worth it, that's something that we're making sure that we do right. So we've batched up a whole lot of changes. We're providing mechanisms to upgrade to the new behaviors early, and then after you've upgraded to version 4, which hasn't been released yet, but when you upgrade to version 4, you'd still be able to upgrade to version 4, but roll back certain behaviors through feature toggles so that you can slowly transition your code base.
So has it ever been frustrating as far as feeling trapped and to move slower, to be safer, or are you perfectly happy with the rate of motion that you're having with the framework?
I think it's yes and no. I'm happy with the rate at which we're moving. Although it is a little bit frustrating when there are specific things that you want to achieve, to move things forward in a direction that you feel is where things should be going. But there's a lot of noise going on with all the other things, trying to protect that API with lots of features and all these different use cases that people are coming up with that kind of distract from the particular forward direction that you're trying to create.
I think the labs idea was ingenious. Did you create that? Did you come up with that idea to be have this separate safe area for playtime and
it kind of came out of necessity. Austin, I don't know if you remember. I think we turned down a number of interesting ideas on pull requests, and we just said to people, please, could you go and make your own library, and then we'll point to it in the docs or something like that. And then one of the guys who's one of the key the core team members now, Max, he had a couple of these out the box ideas, and we said, could you please go and make some contributions in another area, and then we can bring it back in. And then he created NGX Contrib, and then after some discussion with him, we renamed it NGXS Labs, and that's pretty much where it came from. So it kind of came from the pushing and pulling in community. So yeah.
Yeah, it was really organic. I remember getting a notification for NGXS Labs or that org, and I was like, what is this?
I wonder if that's something that you could kind of write up and describe, and people could use as a pattern in their own companies, right? Internally as the code that they develop. Is there a home for that gives them that ability to do the same process, but within their business workflow, right?
Yeah, I think potentially the idea actually came from Angular and Angular Labs, because with Elements and things like that, they had this Angular Labs, and I think that's kind of where it came from. So I guess we could write something about it, but
take credit. I like it.
Yeah.
Cool. So we had a question in the chat about just kind of fundamental differences, or how, if somebody understands NGRX, right, and comes here and says, okay, what's different? How do I take my knowledge of NGRX and then kind of learn NGXS, right?
Yeah, so I think and Austin, please chime in if you have a. It looks like you're itching to say something there, but I think the big difference is that to me this is more modeled on CQRS or event sourcing than and I guess Redux and NGRX also has that sort of feel, but here you're given an opportunity to respond to an action, and within that action handler you can do a number of things. You can update your state, you can update it multiple times, you can do some async work. After that comes back, you can update your state again. So there's a whole life cycle to an action that you can now do. You can also keep keep those methods just focused on updating state. So in essence, each method looks like a mini reducer where it takes in just that action payload, and it takes in what's called a state context, where we're able to get the state, set the state, and do things like that. So you can kind of what I was looking for in Redux and NGRX with the reducers is a way to break down those kind of almost God class reducers with these massive switch statements, and then just breaking them down into these small little chunks. I think the transition between NGRX to NGXS it's something that I haven't done. Unfortunately, that application that I did with NGRX in 2017, I haven't had the opportunity to work on that application again. So I actually haven't done that transition, but all the guys that I've spoken to, they've virtually done it within a day. So there is an alignment between the paradigms, but NGXS offers just a little bit more in terms of maybe looser rules in terms of what you can do in what would have been in your reducer. You can now do a bit of async work. There's a bit of a life cycle to an action. It's really looking at this kind of the CQRS, and an action fires off some process of a number of things happening. And every single time you do async work, you don't have to go off and create another action. And this represents load success or load error, or I find often you create actions to represent different aspects of your process flow in response to asynchronous work. In NGRX and in NGXS, you can kind of all package that together, and you don't have to put all those actions in if you don't want to. If you do want to see all of that stuff flow through your Redux dev tools, then you can, but you don't have to. So you can go for the flavor that you want. Austin, what do you?
Yeah, I think that was really good comparison. One thing that really stuck out that I want to emphasize is the Redux, which is the pattern that NGRX is based on, is very heavy on an action updates the state, and then you react to the state from that action, or you select out the state and react. And so making that structure makes it really easy for like dev tools and to see like state updates and things like that. But it can also, and this is a thing, like when I was creating this, it also makes it very hard to do like simple things, right? Like I just had something that I just want to like, change the color of something now that something happened, right? Like let's say a user saved, and now the little asterisk at the top of my form can go away, right? And before you would have to like have multiple states to perform that, right? Like you would have to have save in progress, and then save completed, and then on complete, you could then create a state that represents that the asterisk can go away now. And so it's like this really like terse state where everything has to be represented. And with event-oriented architecture, you're less about updating state and reading things from the state, and more about observing events and reacting to those events. And a way that you could be reacting to those events could be updating state, but it could be doing something else. And I really like event-oriented architecture for web applications, because if we think about web applications, everything is an event. Every piece of interaction is a page load, a mouse click. They're all events that are bubbling like that. And event-oriented architecture feels really nice in terms of how that is and how that plays out with what the browser does natively. And that's where a lot of that kind of came together around the thoughts for it.
One of the things that stuck with me on that was that concept of the workflow. Not only the thing mentioned earlier about the containment and the mental mind map of the things that all go on, right? And to look at it in one spot, just understand the instructions and the workflow of everything that happens when this action takes place or this event takes place. But also that ability to know when that whole workflow is done so you can do things off of it, right? And respond to that accordingly, right? Without having to, like, I think, Austin, like what you're mentioning, think about ways that I've got to stuff these, like, is this asterisk on? Is this off into my state management? Really, I just want to go, look, I want to run this event, turn it on, and then when the process is done, workflow is done, then I know I can just switch that off or whatever. And so having a solution for that, and I guess would that be like subscribing at the end of the action workflow?
Yeah, it's got various different RxJS operators that you can use to subscribe to the different life cycles of an action that's dispatched.
Yeah, so actually in what we just released now, the NGXS 3.4, so there were a number of so if you do want to access the action stream, there is an action stream available, and you can do effect, almost like an NGRX effect style programming if you do want to, which I think a lot of people have done, where they've just brought their effects and used that same sort of mechanism to keep those that same sort of mechanism of async work and then dispatch and those sort of things going. But in 3.4 we actually added a new operator, which is I actually got to check what it's called. It's called of action completed. So at the moment we've got of action dispatched, of action successful, of action cancelled, of action errored, of action completed. So successful, cancelled, and errored are the three different completion states. So what we just added is now of action completed, so that you can respond to the completion of a specific action type, and you can pick up whether it was successful, an error, or cancelled, or what actually happened. Because previously those were three separate. Well, there are still three separate operators if you're only interested in errors, or if you're only interested in success. But yeah, they reflect that life cycle of your action, where it's essentially dispatched, it's currently in progress, and then it reaches some sort of state of completion, which is error, cancelled, or success. Along those lines of converting an NGRX app, the one thing I found quite interesting is something I used quite heavily in NGRX was the infamous switch map, merge map, concat map, all of those different operators in my effects. And using NGXS, I haven't found that I've needed to go there. Very seldom, maybe just once or twice, but it's really just an edge case. Cancellation is just a little flag that you set on your action decorator, just to say cancelable is true, and if another one of those actions comes through, it just cancels the previous one. So in that way, it's simplified a lot of the things that you have to think about when you're thinking observables, RxJS, that sort of stuff, for your stream of actions. Yeah.
I have some questions. Well, maybe it's just one, but it's not so much surrounding the idea of how to use NGRX or excuse me, NGXS or NGRX, actually any state management thing, but it's more so what's the barrier to entry? And I don't mean complexity or anything else, but what's that mental state where you say, hey, you know what? I'm at the point that I should start to use some sort of central state management system instead of essentially like a subject with in a service, something basic, and then to basically say, all right, hey, I should be stepping up because the thing that I found in talking with people is overuse of state management libraries
Yeah.
because it
I feel like
introduces a
he's
lot of
baiting me.
no, not at all. It's a serious conversation because I feel that people see the idea of, all right, well, so and so's using this, or other people are using this, so I should be using it too, when it may not necessarily fit their use case.
Yeah, so I think along those lines, I don't think it's a question of state management or not, because you are doing state management anyway, no matter what you choose. Either you're doing it custom, or you're doing in state management using RxJS or NGRX or NGXS or Akita or one of those different ones. So I think the question is when do you aim for a library to help you out? Is that more along the lines of what you're looking for?
To an extent, but I feel that there's a lot of applications that don't necessarily need the idea of shared state. That
Yeah.
No,
you need different parts of your component tree to be able to store that. And Austin
they
says
don't.
he's like, I need to say something about this. But I feel
So I
that
just published a blog post recently that says the future of state management is less state management. And it's kind of like
I like the title. I like the way that the title is taking my brain.
it's kind of clickbaity of a clickbaitish of a title, but basically my summary is that we all got excited about Redux when it came out because it could hot reload, and then in React, that's like one of the big reasons why it took off is global global state management, right? And React had a Flux architecture, and Redux came along and they introduced this like hot reload thing where you didn't have to reload your app to be able to like change things. And it like really came up, it really popped off. And then they introduced those dev tools, and those dev tools, like, I mean, they're super slick, right? Like no one can deny that it is really sexy to like click around and see that and be able to rewind it and things like that. And so without thinking, people just jumped and started using these things because of those particular reasons.
It wasn't so much of like just a jump and just to start using, but it was more of a, yelling from the rooftops, if you're not also jumping, you're wrong. Like it was a movement, man. It happened.
Yeah. And so like people were like just doing it because like, oh, well, other people are doing it and look at all these cool tools and right, like we need state management now, right? But look at the past, right? Like we had built apps, large apps for 10 plus years without having to need that type of stuff. And some people will debate me on this and blah, blah, blah. But let me jump to the point of where I'm going with this is a lot of us just picked this up because of popularity or we saw this like fancy widget and didn't really understand the pattern or what it does for us. And that's why you hear all these people talking about like boilerplate, and like why has it got all this stuff? And if I would pose the question to you is like, if you're really complaining about that, then you probably shouldn't be using the tool because when you're using it to its truest form, it actually reduces code.
Yeah.
So just let that sink in for a second. If you've got a lot of boilerplate and you're like complaining about it, then you probably don't need to be using a Redux pattern.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to hear. Is that
Yeah.
it just because there's a tool out there that a lot of people are using does not necessarily mean you need to use it. Not to put down any of the libraries that are out there, especially the one we're talking about today, but just be critical of any tool that you're using. Tools are designed to solve particular problems, and you may not have that particular problem within your application.
But one of the key reasons that I built NGXS was I had this application that had like 6 different panels, and they all would be interacting with each other and live updating. And that made like using event-oriented architecture for that with some like Redux pattern just made really great sense. Like that would be a nightmare to try to wire together using just like top-down approaches. And so, I mean, I'd really say, you know, if you're questioning that, then like it's probably worth evaluating if you should be using it. And you know what? You can also use these patterns in only certain spots of your app. You don't have to write your entire app with this. So if there's like a particular page or something in your app that like is very interesting and has lots of interactions,
Let's call
just
it
write that
hella
one.
complicated. If there's a hella complicated page.
Yeah, and you can just use it in that one spot. You don't have to use it for your entire app. And so that's my reply to that. And you baited me, I'm sure, but
Yeah,
Not at
can
all.
I take on that bait just a little as well?
I wanted to clarify though. I'm not baiting by any stretch. I'm just trying to clarify so that people can understand the big picture of just because there's a great tool that provides great functionality does not mean that you necessarily need to use it.
Yeah, so just along those lines, I think everything that's been said is absolutely bang on. You don't want to just be adding a library just because it's just because everybody else is doing it and it's the cool thing to do or whatever. But the one thing that I really appreciate about state management, but especially with NGXS, is that it doesn't feel like it's a lot more effort to put it in. You can get going very, very quickly. And the one thing that I appreciate about it is that it kind of gives a place for some of your application logic to live. I've walked quite a road as a dev. I started out in WinForms, and any dev that's ever done that is cringing right now. But the number of applications that I saw where there were SQL statements behind button clicks and things like that, and then we get into this new world of JavaScript and SPAs and well, Angular JS and now Angular and React and Vue and all the others. But then you see developers starting to do the same sort of things where in their components they just pile in all this logic. They pile in all this kind of coordination code and all of the stuff that's going on. And I kind of feel like it does give a place for some of that code to live. So I'm all for the idea of you probably don't need it. If you're thinking about it, you'll know when you need it. Especially if you've got shared state across your applications, you're trying to synchronize a number of different things. It's definitely something that you should start looking at. But the one thing that I like about it is if you didn't have that situation and you were to recklessly just pick a library just because, I'd say just for the fact that it gives some place for some of your code to live, I really appreciate that sort of idea. In the application that we developed in 2017, it was a very, very large website. It's I think it's the 25th most used website in South Africa. It's got a lot of things going on, very, very deeply nested state, and it was definitely a use case for state management. But the one thing that it really brought to the table was that we created a desktop website front end and did all of that with the components, but moved most of the state management and most of the application logic into the state management and into kind of these back-end services. And the components were just thin and very simple and not much going on in them. And then they used the exact same code. It was virtually a 90% code reuse in terms of creating a mobile site. It was not a responsive site. It was a totally different site served up in a different way for mobile, and it was just a different set of components assembling the state and showing the state in different ways. So in that way, we were able to service kind of two very different paradigms off of the same backend, and I'd call it an architecture. And it just so happened that state management helped with that. And I think that is maybe one itch that it does scratch, is it kind of gives a place for things to live. I like to see my components with absolutely minimal code in them. So that for me is maybe one of the other selling points that wasn't mentioned.
Yeah, it's almost like a back end logic in your front end to do. Yeah, for
The
sure.
way I see it.
Ah.
Almost like an ORM, but maybe we shouldn't. I don't know.
Real Tai Chi, but yeah, right.
No.
I think one of the things I like about this discussion that came out is when you do decide that you do need this type of state management solution, embrace the solution that you decide to go with, right? And realize that like you're taking it on to solve these challenges that you're facing and to help your application be better. And embrace that, and don't look at it as like, oh, this is great, but it's got this boilerplate, but it's got this stuff. Like realize that like, no, but it's adding all this greatness to it. And then take that, and if you go, okay, this is great, but it doesn't completely do what I need to do, then go maybe write your own like Austin did, right?
Or add on to labs.
or do labs, right? Or
Yeah.
figure out ways you could do that, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
Right,
so
well-
I think sorry, just one thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up is in version 3.4, there's the one feature that we added called state operators. So if you are using NGXS out there, I'd definitely recommend having a look at state operators, because when you look at these larger state classes that people are building, there's once again kind of a whole lot of boilerplate that goes on to do with managing immutability and spread operators and all of those sort of things that go on when you're making sort of the copy on write scenarios that we've got to do with the Redux pattern. So state operators is something that can really help out with reducing the amount of code that you write there. And in essence, it's almost like a reverse curried reducer. It's probably the best way I could describe it. But essentially, it's a function that you provide that it takes in the previous state and returns the new state. And it accesses what it needs to modify the state with through its closure. So you'd create some sort of creator mechanism for that. So it's there's not enough time to really go in depth about that, but we did release an article on Medium on the NGXS organization about state operators. I think it also provides an opportunity for a pattern to be used that is translatable between the different libraries and different paradigms. So you write more code that's focused on doing those updates of your state as opposed to bedded down into a library. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, before we get to our picks and wrap up the episode, where can people find out all this information about NGXS?
So I think the best place to go would be ngxs.io. In the episode last year, it was kind of, well, open up Google and type in GitHub and type in NGXS and you're going to find it after some stockbroking website or something like that. But now there's a place to live. It's ngxs.io. And yeah, so that would be the best place to go.
Awesome. That's funny. You bring up the stock stuff. Oh, stocks. Yeah, okay. Very
and
cool.
and people can find you, Mark, where online?
My Twitter handle is Mark Whitfeld. It's pretty much my name. Pretty straightforward.
What's your phone number in case people have questions?
Yes, and if
Oh
you
yeah,
have a fax.
555.
Blood type as well.
All right, cool. Well, let's get into some picks. We'll go down the list of our panelists first, and then so Alyssa, you have some picks?
I don't have a pick, but I hear Austin has like 10, so he'll make up for me.
Then Austin, what do you got?
I do. I haven't had picks the past couple of times, and when I don't have picks for a while, I always have like 100 at once. Storybook 5.0 dropped. Storybook, if you do not know about this, is the coolest thing that you can find right now. Storybook is a app that it's a framework that allows you to create like component demos. And if you're building out, reusable components and things like that, you can use Storybook to create these in isolation. They dropped 5.0 and it's got a lot of awesome changes in it in terms of aesthetics and plugins and things like that. Also, this is on a different topic, not Angular related, but Justin's shaking his head. I have been working on a React data visualization framework called ReaViz, and that came out today. I'm super excited about it. And then one other thing, I have been working with Rocky. I have been working on finding errors in my app. So like how users are using my apps that I deploy at work. I found this really cool tool called FullStory that allows you to like replay sessions, and you can like inspect the DOM as the sessions are replaying. It's a little big brother, but it's super cool. So that's my 3 picks.
How is it Big Brother?
Oh, just go watch the demo.
Okay.
All right, Mike, do you have any picks?
I have a non-tech pick. It's actually a Netflix show, and I couldn't tell you when it actually came out, but I've been watching it recently. It's called Travelers, with Eric McCormick, who's famous from playing Will in Will and Grace. But it's interesting, sci-fi, and I've been enjoying it. I'm about halfway through the 2nd season.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to pick some media then. I'm going to pick Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse because that's rapidly getting close to being maybe my favorite movie ever. It's pretty amazing. So that's my pick. It's out on digital now. I think it might still be in theaters too. You got to check it out. That's my pick. Mark, do you have any picks for us?
Yeah, I think. Well, maybe I mentioned it now to have a look at state operators. If you are using NGXS, there's also some exciting things coming down the line in terms of potentially our own dev tool and things like that. With all the boilerplate that we're handling for you, there's a whole lot extra that we know about your application, so we can potentially surface that in the dev tool. But that's a much longer vision going on there. And then I think as a general pick, I think it's easy to focus on texts and libraries and even languages as you pursuing things within your dev career. And for myself, I think my pick is to focus on the principles and methodologies that can translate across these things. Yeah, we do quite a bit of training. We train people in terms of things like test-driven development, in terms of clean code, dev economics, how to really quantify the value of the work that you're doing within a dev team. And I think if as a developer we focus on those sort of things, I think the world of development will be a better place. We can talk about libraries, we can talk about tech, we can talk about all these things, but yeah. So my pick is focus on principles and methodologies.
That's a great thing. I think we need to have an episode on like clean coding and Angular. We should do something like that. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. Thanks a ton for coming on, sharing your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Cheers.
everyone. Have a good one. See ya.
Bye.